Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Blades and Behavior. I'm your host, Dr. Alicia Naser. In today's episode, I was very lucky and so grateful to sit down with Mike Futa, who is currently the co host of the Fan Hockey Show with Matt Marchese on Sportsnet. And he also was the former assistant GM of the LA Kings. And before that, just tons of experience in the hockey world. I was so grateful to have him on and really looking forward to you all hearing this episode because he has such a rich history and experience in hockey. He has seen the history and the evolution of the sport in terms of player development and scouting and talent identification. We talk about all of these topics as well as how to scout the intangibles. And we talk about the importance and the evolution of mental performance, mental health, and these different topics in hockey. So I'm really looking forward to all of you hearing this. It was a great episode. I can't stress enough how lucky I feel that he took the time to share his experience and storytelling and insights. And we really kind of combined both of our professions to hopefully make this a really great episode for all of you. As a disclaimer, guests appearing on the Blades and Behavior podcast do so solely in their personal capacity, and their participation does not constitute or imply endorsement, affiliation, or sponsorship by any team, league, employer, or organization with which they're affiliated, including organizations within professional sports leagues. Guest appearances do not indicate that individuals featured on the podcast are clients of mine. Any individuals mentioned in the podcast are also not clients of mine. All statements, perspectives, and opinions expressed during the podcast episode are those of the individual speakers and are provided for discussion and informational purposes only. They should not be interpreted as official positions, policies, or statements by any governing body. Content presented on the Blades and Behavior podcast is not intended to serve as medical, psychological, legal, or professional advice, nor should it be relied upon as organizational guidance or performance directives from any team, athlete, or staff member. The content contained in this podcast is provided for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to substitute for professional, medical, psychological, or behavioral health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. While we seek the guidance of a qualified healthcare or behavioral professional regarding any questions or concerns you may have. This podcast and all related content produced by the Naser Institute for Behavioral Sports Psychology are independent of and not affiliated with, sponsored by, or endorsed by the Behavior Analyst Certification Board. All materials and intellectual property of the Naser Institute for Behavioral Sports Psychology and are protected under U.S. and international copyright law. Any reproduction, distribution, or use of this material without explicit written consent is strictly prohibited. And with that, let's get to today's episode. My friend.
How are you doing? I'm the most absolutely worst media savvy, uh, technical, like literally. Like
Well, it's a good thing Mike produces your shows and you guys don't produce the show.
certainly not. Well, Marchese considers himself to be, and he's definitely level up from me with regards technological stuff. But Gentili's, I'd be lost.
I don't know, Marchese. Remember that day when I came on the show and he was asking me about untangling headphones? And you're like,
Well, but that was problematic. The fact that I think I actually said we've got a doctor on, and our first question is how do we untangle headsets. So yeah, I do tell you when you're like the further I went up as an NHL executive, you do become codependent on stuff that's just
yeah.
like as far as sending things like through the like you're not like and then all of a sudden the real world hits. It's like it was like the first time after I got fired in LA that I had to pump gas and not charge it to the team. I was literally like ready to quit, like everything. I forgot what it was like to buy your own food. It was like one of those movies. Like people buy food, they pay for gas. I got a bill in that the LA Kings aren't paying. What do I do? So
Well,
real world problems.
yeah,
Anyway,
it's humbling. It's humbling. Okay, well, I know you said that you have your parents and
I just told them not to crack. Like literally, like my dad's like, why can't I be on? You know,
oh, he's more than welcome. We would love it. It's kind of how everybody probably feels about having Nasara on.
the fact I told them they're driving from Midland, so I haven't heard them yet.
Okay.
At some point, because I asked them not to come through the closed door, they will. That's just
Like clockwork, like clockwork. Okay, so we won't keep you too long. How was the show today? Thank you for being here. Truly, thank you for being here. I'm so excited
you
to
feel
have
that
you.
you feel better. You,
Absolutely. But
you said
how
you weren't feeling well last week.
Oh, yeah, yeah, I'm better now. Wasn't feeling well
Yeah.
last week, and it was probably the worst week to not feel well because it was trade deadline week.
Yeah.
And, I just had a bunch of, clients who were a little on edge, just wondering if some moves for them were gonna be made, which there
I
weren't, so
can
that was.
imagine. That was stuff I had questions for you about that. So
Yeah. Let me start with this. So I had a client that I was working with last season in the NHL, and I remember that, you have such a rich history and experience, in your career. And this is why I was really happy to have you on and talk with you. But um I had a client in the NHL last season. And I remember one day he said he's been, playing for a few years, and he had said, this was like the first time I realized, like, "Oh, this is my job. This is my career." Like, this is not just a fun game I'm playing in on an ODR in my backyard anymore. Like, the NHL it's very hard to make it, and it's even harder to stay there. And so I was wondering for you, just in your previous history with the LA Kings, when you first started working in the NHL in front office, like, was there a moment that made you realize how hard it is to build a winning team and how hard it is to be in the NHL, or was it just a history of experiences over time? Or was there one particular moment? Because I think for him, this specific practice before a really important game, he was like, "Oh, this is when I realized it's really hard in this league." And so I wonder for you, with all of your history and your experience, was there a moment like that for you?
personally, in my job, it was like because I mean, I was a good player, but I mean, I played pro in Europe, but I mean, I had taken a lot of shortcuts as a player that kept me from being the best I could as a player. And I think when the opportunity, when I came back from Europe, I was like 27 years old, and I was all of a sudden I'm the youngest coach in the Ontario Hockey League at 27, and I'm like, what's going on here? Like,
Mm.
I'm kind of winging it. And then I was fortunate enough to surround I've always been one of those, and I know you're like Alicia, some people like to surround themselves with people that are subservient and, look up to you like you're the cat's meow or whatever. I've always tried to surround myself by people that fill my weaknesses and make me better and delegate and trust. And I think that was something when I mean, I remember hiring Mark Osborne as assistant coach, the NHL Mark Osborne, and just realizing all of a sudden, wow, like this guy's got so much more knowledge of being a coach. And it actually started because I got fired, like we are expansion team. I got fired, but that's probably the first time you realize it's a job when you get fired. Because I was like, I didn't have a long history of being fired in my life. And maybe because I didn't put in the drop ceiling when I was 17 at my construction job, never where it's actually like I just lost my job, like, wow, like, paycheck stuff, so, yeah, that
I have
was
to pump my own gas and put it on my own card now.
realized I was a pro when they took my job away and didn't pay me anymore, so but I also realized that I thought I have more of a strength in the management side because I was way more passionate when it came to evaluating talent. I loved the coaching, I loved the speeches, but I just didn't feel even the players, I didn't think I was making them like, my practices were fine, but I was always questioning whether I was getting the best out of players because was this my path? And it wasn't I was a good coach, but I thought I had a chance to be like a better than good executive. And the door opened. And then again, it's all the same. It's all the respectful tools you have, your ability to work. You don't want to get outworked. You want to be prepared, your notes, but just becomes a bigger stage. Like I remember scouting meetings where where you'd literally write on like those peel of paper back and write down your lines and cross out marker, and then all of a sudden you're in the NHL and you've got like a guy who looks like Elton John typing stuff out, and every time you speak, it's up on the board, and there's guys there. They're like there's people there that are like courtroom stenographers because
Oh, yeah.
nobody's allowed to say anything. Like in junior meetings, you'd say, what about this player? And the guy, well, he can't play. Okay, he can't play. Cross the NHL, it's like you have to have answers for everything. Like if you say he can't play and don't have 8 reasons why he can't play, you're gonna get lose your job again. And plus the accountability factor that in the scouting industry, people tend to always like they keep quiet or the certain scouts, and then when a player makes it, they go, I love that guy. I had him way higher than that guy. And yeah, I loved him and you should and there's no accountability with it. So at the NHL, everything you say in a scoutsman year, at least when I was in Los Angeles, was recorded. So you couldn't go
Oh.
and change and it was on. So your reports, everything was so important and your reports were written like that was your homework, right? And you had to take pride because your boss, as particularly my boss, was going to read your homework. So there was
Mhm.
accountability at every level. And again, it's your job and you start to learn on the fly, but you also have to realize that you're there for a reason. And I checked every box to be there. So I couldn't doubt myself and my confidence that I belong there. When I
Mhm.
walked in my first meeting and I'm looking around and going, I got that guy's hockey card. I got that guy's hockey card, and some of them are technically under me in the food chain. So you've got to check your ego, make sure you don't come across like, "Hey, before we start this meeting, can you autograph this for me?" Like you've got to make sure you're respectful, but they understand why you're there.
Yeah.
And it always for me came back to Wayne Simmonds, and that's when I think I realized I was a pro. So that it does full circle. And I'll talk about Wayne too because I had Wayne as a 17-year-old who basically was coming from nothing in Owen Sound, like no money. His brother had to give up his football career because they could only afford one set of equipment. One of those stories, right? So when I got him to Owen Sound, I made him a promise that
Mhm.
he had a scholarship, but he didn't want to go that. He would have lasted 2 hours in the US in school, but he wanted to be an OHL guy. That was his style. I ended up drafting him, bringing him to Owen Sound, and I was like basically his surrogate dad. And great family, but I still remember them saying to me, I was in this house. I remember there was hardly any lighting, and his mom and dad saying, "You just took my son's scholarship away. You better stand by him, right? Like he had a chance to go to the States and he's giving it up. You better look
Mhm.
after him." And so we come to Owen Sound, and Wayne's kind of struggling a bit, right? Like he's like,
Mhm.
I remember he had a penalty shot in his sold out building against the London Knights, and he went in and he leaned on his stick, and his stick broke, and he fell
Oh,
on the
no.
and he just fell. And I'm like, it was just embarrassing. So there's no shot, anything, and he's like, and all of a sudden the door swings afterwards. We end up winning, but he comes in, the door opens my office, and he just looks at me, goes, "Futes, did you see that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah." He goes, "Not only am I the only black guy in Owen Sound," he goes, "Now I've stood out for another reading." He goes, "That was the most embarrassing moment of my life." So we were continually working with stuff and Wayne had to educate me on, like, I never looked at Wayne as had any color to him, right? But he had to educate me on what he was being treated like as a black player
Yeah.
playing hockey, which educated me to another level. And I became overprotective of him uh, from that facet because I was kind of naive to the fact what he was going through. Uh, you know, with a guy that had skinny ankles and didn't look like your regular hockey player who still
Yeah.
wanted to make it. And I
Yeah.
truly believed inside, like people that had no idea how tough he was. I knew, which is the most thing. That's why I know we talk about character. I knew he had more character than any kid I'd ever been around.
Yeah.
And, uh, and so it works out. And then he ends up, I leave. He doesn't talk to me. He thinks I've deserted him in Owen Sound. And I go to Los Angeles and he's not even on anybody's draft list. And I was challenged when I got there, is there anybody on our list in the Ontario Hockey League that we don't have on our list?
Mhm.
I said, I felt bad, but they didn't even have Wayne Simmonds on their list. It wasn't like he was in the wrong spot. He wasn't
Mhm.
on the list. And they said, where would you put him? And I said, number two, right behind Sam Gagne. And
Wow.
they laughing at me. And
Yeah.
I'm like, sorry. I mean, I've seen all these guys more than any, and I truly believe that's where he belongs. So I was told to make a presentation and come back and show these guys. And they had just fired. So they were kind of moving all over the place and scouts were everywhere. So it was a little disorganized, but I had to do a presentation to show why Wayne Simmonds belongs basically in the go from not being on the list to being in the first round of the NHL draft. And
So
it
what
was,
did you put in your presentation?
what's that?
What did you put in your presentation?
At least I put in I had put in part of his play, what I felt was really NHL ready. Um,
Okay.
the one week he was like the OHL player of the week, which they didn't even know. He had something like 5 goals, 3 assists. They were all like puck protection kind of goals, like the NHL stuff that translates.
Yeah.
And the thing about him for a kid, he was like 158 pounds. But all of his strength tests, which you wouldn't know, were that of someone well over 200 pounds. Like
Wow.
he was so physically strong, and like his vertical jump was like he just didn't look like a hockey player. And he kind of skated. They called him like the Spider Man. He kind of around the ice. He got around fast, but it wasn't a fluent stride. But there was so much about him. And then they saw him fight, and they're like, oh my lord, like he's that tough too. Like this is a Scarborough Street kid, Scarborough Pickering. So by the time I was at it, he was on the list and like he was like 10th overall in the NHL on the entire list throughout the world.
Wow.
And I believed him to be there. But then as the draft starts to come along, and then he's it comes to the draft and they're like, where would you take him? And I'm like, well, nobody really knows about him, so we can move back in the draft and take him and be safe. And Dean
Not
Lombardi,
thinking anybody's gonna come for him.
no. And I knew, because I was the general manager, I knew who was interested in him, and there were very few teams interested in him at all.
Yeah.
But there was some interest. And then Dean Lombardi just said, you just did a presentation in front of an entire National Hockey League staff to prove that he's number 10. And now you don't have the cojones, that wasn't the word he used, to stand up and make a pick where you
Yeah.
know that it belongs. And I was
Yeah.
like, this is the difference between being a pro and being an amateur, where you play. He goes, I can't believe I even hired you to be on my staff. If
Wow.
you can make a presentation like that, and then you can't even, he goes, if you're wrong, I'll live with that. But you made a presentation that shows you've got insider trading on his character. There's every chance that you could be right. And I was like, okay, well, where would you take him? I said, then I'd take him. We had 2 picks in the second round. I'd take him in the second round. And then you could just hear like pens drop, like the other scouts, like, okay,
Yeah.
this was fine. Now we're going to take Wayne Simmonds in the second round of the NHL draft.
Yeah.
And we go to my first draft, and I'm sitting there, and it gets to the second round, and we had 2 picks, and we actually could have taken them we took them with our second pick in the second round. They actually pushed the microphone over to me to make sure nobody could hear that it was me picking Wayne Simmonds second round of an NHL draft. Nobody wanted, everybody's kind of like, it's,
Yeah.
it's, it's him. And then I did it. Wayne didn't know I was taking him. He wasn't even at the draft. He almost drove off the road. He wasn't talking to me because I told him, I said, Wayne, you're not even on our list. I apologize. So he thought our relationship had gone like this, but I couldn't tell him because I didn't want him to leak out how high we had on the list.
Yeah.
And then become something we might lose him. So anyways, long story short, we take him. He comes in. He almost makes the team as an 18-year-old. He's in the NHL by the time he's 19. He's,
Yeah.
and you talk about first from a pro to an amateur. So I went kind of like his guy in junior, where I knew his bank account had I was in charge of his bank account. So he had about $7 in his bank account in the OHL. And all of a sudden he starts collecting, he signs his contract, second round contract. So he's now got $1 million contract, and he's now getting checks. And I forget that he doesn't know how to. So they call me and said, like, on Eustace King was and he goes, Future, we got to do something about Wang. I go, what's wrong? He goes, and he took a picture at his bed table in his hotel, just had a bunch of checks piled up.
Because he didn't know how to deposit that.
Had a
Mobile deposit didn't exist back then.
no idea. So he's like, still like how to get a bank account and do those things. And he says, that's when he realized he was a pro,
He
when
was
he
a
went your Kelsey Montana's and your overage money, and Owen Sound to St. Marie. And now all of a sudden the checks
Yeah.
are nothing he's ever seen in his life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And all of a sudden Wayne, he's one of those guys that, and he was a better player than I ever thought he was going to be, Doc, but I knew the character was there.
Mm-hmm.
Mark Giordano is the other one. And those 2 players kind of dictated where I went, because they were 2 players that nobody had in their list, but I knew their character, and I
Mm-hmm.
kind of just facilitated doors opening, and every door that they went through, they just made me look better and better because they just outworked everybody.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they had that character that I knew that they were never going to let me down. And if they were going to fail, somebody'd be dead on a train track somewhere to stop them from getting there. There was no way. I knew that Wayne Simmonds, when he got to 185 pounds, was going to be pound for pound one of the strongest players in the league. And now that 158-pound kid, is fighting guys in the National Hockey League and protecting pucks and all the little things that he used to do that development guys could clean up. Plus he had the it factor as far as character and then, so it's funny. And the 2 guys, Giordano, which I won't go into so much his story, but it's funny. They both played their 1,000th game within 3 days of one another,
Wow.
which is kind of hockey karma for me to say my 2 undrafted guys, they were going nowhere, that I believed in, played their 1,000th game. And I mean,
Yeah.
I remember because Gio had just been traded, or he was still with Seattle, I guess. And knew he was getting traded, but he and Simmer, we were in the same rink together the same night and got to spend that moment together, which is pretty cool. Those are the things that Like, those are the mental sides of things when you start to think about evaluating character, and I know that's where you wanna go with it, but there's no analytic, and that's when I get into it with the analytics guys, that
Yeah.
there's no analytic to measure character, right?
Yeah, it's an amazing story, by the way. Amazing story. It's heavy on the heart in the best way because it does come full circle, So it's a wonderful story. Would you say, I have a couple questions about it though. Would you say that maybe Wayne Simmonds was a player who forced you to rethink how you evaluate talent and how you think about talent? Because that was gonna be one of my next questions for you. Has there ever been a player that has forced you to rethink how you evaluate talent? And then also, second question, and I know we talked about how times have changed, and I remember when I came on the show, you were telling me when back in LA, you had noticed that they put a room in there, like a mental health type of room for the players to, like, come in your presentation that you made of him, was there anything about his character? Or was it all the NHL stuff that translates, like the hockey IQ and the smarts, or was there anything about character and the intangibles in that presentation you made? Because I don't know if it mattered as much then or if it was taken as seriously as sometimes it is now, thinking about character and mental health and mental performance.
I think that that side of it, the mental side of it, particularly in Wayne's world, oof, that's bad, that he literally had to work on that side because he had the worst body language of almost again, that's one thing I look for a lot in
Yeah.
confidence. I don't want any kind of arrogance or over the top, but
Mhm.
he had something went wrong, like, and he had such a like because he was so skinny that his entire droopiness, and you could see, like, the bottom lip just like he just, like, moped, and you could see it
Mhm.
on it's like, when he got taken off, it was like the stick smacking and the stuff would drive and my coach, Mike Stothers, he's the assistant coach now with Pittsburgh Penguins, that would be something that would just drive him literally nuts, and I'm
Yeah.
like, "You don't understand, Simmer, if you don't clean that up,
Mhm.
uh, you're not gonna get a chance to show how tough you are or what your skill set are," because that's such a general thing that if you show your coach up or your body language and you're moping and you're in that stuff, it's a non-starter, and that was something we really had to work on, like, consciously, and it's amazing as there was never an instance when you saw him in his 19, 20-year-old year where you could see where people were
Mhm.
getting to him, or that
Mhm.
when things weren't going his way, it was chest out, shoulder up, head up, nobody's getting to me, and in
Yeah.
his case, as I said, he reinvented the wheel for me because I never had to have somebody, and this is gonna sound but it's true. I never had somebody that I cared so much about, but I could never relate that he had to go the eyes he was looking through as a black hockey player coming up in an industry that didn't have a lot of, it
Life
was
yeah.
yeah, and I mean, so I always had to when I was phrasing it, it was never any kind of thing about, "Oh, I don't want him to think I'm offending him racially." It was like, I could never see it through his eyes,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
When
because
some
you're just not him. Yeah.
Like, I mean, he literally like, his first game in London as an exhibition, like, somebody this is at the NHL level. He's playing in an NHL exhibition game, and someone threw a banana at him on the ice,
Yeah.
right? And it
Yeah.
was like it was an incident, like, Hockey News covered it and stuff like that, but I'm like, I couldn't even function in my head that, first of all, that that still went on,
Yeah.
but that it did, and not only that, in a place like there's, like, 9,000 people there, so there was no shame. The person who did it wasn't trying to hide it,
Yeah.
and he took stuff like that, and then, and again, he built on that so much, he almost wore it as a badge of courage that that was something I'm gonna overcome the fact that I'm 158 pounds and look like I none of my body type looks like I should be playing hockey, no less at any level, more than national hockey level, but I'm gonna overcome this barrier as well,
Yeah.
and it was something that he taught me about where I became almost more angry and defensive when I felt somebody might be going down that road with him, uh,
Mhm.
but I also had that feeling that and that's a different type of mental toughness.
Oh, yeah, that's one that you're born with, and to combat that and not let that break you is in itself an act of courage and an act of bravery, and I think that speaks also to character. He has these barriers that he has to live with, and how he chooses to face them is going to reflect who he is as a person, right? And whether or not he wanted to or not, because it just speaks to the bravery and the courage there. And I think hockey, in a lot of ways, I talk a lot with players about risk taking, and it's an act of bravery to take risks. Like your shot selection is correlated to risk, and bravery and courage and having the willingness to do something when you don't know the outcome, or having the willingness to do something and to act in a way because to represent who you are, and it shows in their game.
And that's why, like, when this guy, and the other thing about it that we go back to the story is like, this is where the hockey industry, where I did learn it was a business. And I was very fortunate enough when I was still coaching to coach Team Canada with the under 17 group with Mike Richards and Jeff Carter. And
Mhm.
they were like the be all and end all of like forwards. They basically were the entire forward group that ended up forming that World Junior team they said would never be beat with Sidney Crosby, that whole age bracket, right? So I had the forwards. All the defensemen were out west. I mean, my best defenseman was Paul Bissonnette, which that's another story altogether. Who's we've gone on to we have different ways that our lives have linked together. But I
It's
mean,
so interesting.
but he's like got the most, but I knew at the time he had this character too. You knew he had all those intangibles and he was going to do everything possible. And he
Yeah.
willed his way into a National Hockey League. Like this guy did not win a fight in junior. We're talking about Biss. Sorry to get off. He did
No, it's
not
okay.
win a fight in junior. I traded for him. He showed up for every fight, couldn't win a fight. And this guy found a way to make himself a National Hockey League player because that was something he was fearless.
Yeah.
And that speaks volumes again to how much character means to me. And it's still the guys that resonate with me. And I that was one of the best compliments I ever had. Dean Lombardi said to me, he goes, you're like a culture builder, right? Like
Mhm.
you bring in guys that have that factor, right? And I think,
Mhm.
Doc, if you bring in like Kyle Clifford and you move him up your list because you know he's got every intangible, and you take Wayne Simmonds in a second round, when you're trying to change the culture in LA of basically sunshine and palm trees, our wives shop on Rodeo Drive and we don't care whether we win, rah, rah, rah. And like
Yeah.
Gretzky brought it there and that team was amazing. But for so long, not a banner to be found. It was all like Marcel Dion and the Triple Crown, but they didn't have a team. And we went down there and we built a team filled with character and surrounded some great players with character guys to a point. We probably had 15 guys in our locker room that could have been a captain, like the Justin Williams and and to Mike Richards, who I knew because I saw it firsthand. He beat me out in the one sound attack with the Kitchener Rangers almost single handedly. That's what kind of player he was, and he had every facet of what Captain Canada, team first, go through a wall for a teammate. And then when Dean Lombardi called me into the office, said, "Futes, we're going to trade Wayne Simmonds and Braden Shen, who's another one of my guys." That was like these guys. They call them assets or draft picks until they become in your life, and then they become like your kids, right? Like we
Yeah.
never looked at these guys like assets. They were like my sons or like I was like they're everything. Like, so when he called, we're trading him, I was devastated. He actually said, "We're trading your son," which I knew that meant Wayne. And clearly I'm not his dad, but he was like, and he goes, "We're getting Mike Richards." And I was like, "Ooh, hmm."
Mhm.
So I realized there was a sense of pride in it. Like once the devastation was over and having to talk to them about moving on, was that we had created such great players that we were able to trade two young studs. That was the epitome of a hockey trade for me.
Yeah.
Philadelphia knew exactly what they were getting. They were getting culture builders. They just weren't at a stage and they were giving up the ultimate. They were giving up their captain. And that was kind of the last piece of our puzzle in LA to win the cups, right? To bring him over. And we do end up winning Stanley Cups. And I knew that Mike Richards and Jeff Carter and all these guys that we were trading for, I knew they had that. So even though
Yeah.
they were struggling in Columbus and Philly and there was questions about their character, I knew that that was a bit of a superficial thing, that once that was peeled back, the real character would come through. And we got the best version of Mike Richards and Jeff Carter. And that's how we got our cups, with guys like that and Justin Williams and Wayne Simmonds. These guys go on, like Braden Shen. First night he wins his cup, he calls me and he's like, "Futes, I got one. I got one." Because they were devastated, right? They
Yeah.
loved me. They were cornerstone Philadelphia Flyers, but they also, well, people were saying, as they were leading the league in scoring, and they were saying, "Well, you guys, the Flyers won the trade. Like Mike Richards got in trouble with the law and he's retired. And like, they're like, we didn't win the trade. Mike Richards won them 2 Stanley Cups.
Mhm.
So until we win Stanley Cups, that trade is firmly a win to the LA Kings. And that showed me about their character too. They weren't concerned anything about their individual accolades and that they were doing so well individually in Philly because they hadn't won the prize of a cup. And it still just eats Wayne to death that he never won a Stanley Cup, no matter what he like. And he ended up playing in All-Star games and won World Juniors. But the ultimate thing was that cup. I didn't get that cup, but it tells me how much real teammates care more about the individual the team award than the individual award, which is so interesting because you brought it up with me, like how Connor
Mhm.
McDavid, and
Yeah.
you can explain that to me, how this guy can be looked at as anything but a champion yet.
I wonder if you would agree with this. Do you think it's harder to come by now, that group think as opposed to an individual mindset and the effort it takes for a group to win? Because I don't know, something about what I'm hearing from OHL, like scouts and teams, and even parents sometimes, of like the questions that I get asked by parents or by scouts is it seems as though sometimes there's this individuality, and I have to constantly be reminding. And I thought it was the goalies I would have to remind, "Hey, hockey's not an individual sport," but there it's not that. It's more so like this generation now coming up, and I hate to be the person that says, "Oh, the generation now," but it is, I think maybe because of how competitive hockey is growing and how quickly the game is moving and the talent now younger than ever, right? We're seeing but the individuality, if you have that mindset, it won't get you to the NHL and it won't get you far, at least not for a long, sustainable career, because hockey is a group sport. And to win a cup, everyone has to be on board. And so I don't know, what have you observed or noticed anything where the individuality of it is more so now as opposed to some of camaraderie? And that's not to say there still isn't camaraderie, but there's something about I need to make it to this level. And where if you have more of group think of I want the group to make it, those kinds of players I feel like are hard to come by because it is so easy to only focus on yourself and your own success and how far you're going.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think that that's the unique part, and that's kind of what drives me to want to get back in it
Mhm.
because I want to know. I personally think that the player, I mean, I don't argue how much more skilled these players are coming up, but
Mhm.
that intangible of it's
Yeah.
all about the team.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's something that I think with some guys you can still see it's natural. I think unfortunately it's like a unicorn now, where before
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
could
okay.
go in and 7 out of 10 guys, you could say that guy, I think he's got it. Whereas now it's like when you talk to teams about like nobody puts like I used to write a report and say, I think this guy could be like Mike Richards. He's gonna be a captain, right? And from what you see that everything he does at the junior level is translatable, whereas you see other guys that a lot of times just the best player is the captain. And,
Mhm.
and because you don't want to rock the boat, if the guy that's the leading scorer on your team is going to get drafted the highest doesn't have the C, then maybe we don't want him upset. We're in
Yeah.
that thing, like what's the and I guess and you want to have a truth serum for it. Because some of these kids are so coached that that's one thing I could peel back to when I felt that I was getting, I'll date myself again because it's like there used to be this Eddie Haskell character in this stupid Leave It to Beaver show, but this kid used to literally come in and everything he'd say, he was the biggest dirtbag ever. And then when he got in front of adults, he was like,
Yeah.
the apple on the desk. Yes, sir. No, sir. Yes, sir. No, sir. Yes, sir. No,
Yeah.
sir. And then and you realize, so I'd say, like, I had a little column that said Eddie Haskell, and then I'd have like, who's Eddie? What? What? And I just knew that was my guy. I don't think this is real. I don't think this
Yeah.
is sustainable. I think this is an act. Right. And I had a no fly list with 4 players, and no, I cannot give you their names,
I
but
wouldn't ask for him anyway.
and 4 for 4 on guys that I wouldn't based on everything they did in junior, and they were all exceptional players. I would, under no circumstance, want them on
Yeah.
my team because I don't think they would never be good teammates. And
Yeah.
you could, no matter when you put your head in your pillow at night as a junior coach and you're terrified what might be going on in your community, you look differently at those kind of things when
Yeah.
you're in the because you don't want a team full of angels, but there's certain things that could become problematic at an NHL level, which would it could sidetrack your entire team and your
Yep.
career with the decisions they might make, not on the ice, off the ice. So
Yeah.
it's very unique to that set. But yeah, I agree with you. I think there's some kids that you'd probably get applause. Like I know if I said to Mike Richards, what if you had a choice of winning the Conn Smythe as the most valuable player in the National Hockey League or a Stanley Cup as an 18-year-old, he would have probably told me to go F off and all I care about is a Stanley Cup. And I immediately would know he means it, right?
Yeah.
Whereas there's other guys, I know there's guys that would, if I could be the leading scorer and be the first pick overall, but never win a Stanley Cup and
Yeah.
they would internally have to think about it. And then they'd spill the gravy train where oh my God, no, I'd want the cups. Yeah. But and if you can peel back that, then that's where it's hard because you see these championship teams now. You talk about, and of course they do their analytics and they draft well, they develop well, but they all have that factor. Like when you watch the Florida Panthers, right? Forget about how well they've drafted and the great moves that Bill Zito made and they've got that factor. You know, those guys like the Marchands and they were the Florida Panthers until Tkachuk arrived and and these guys, all of a sudden, these great picks like Ekblad that was a great player, couldn't get out of his own way. And Barkov, incredible lead. Now you're surrounding them with true guys that would literally cut off their arm to be a champion. And everybody, now your whole culture is that. Like you watch, this is what it is to be a Florida Panther. And it translates. And there's not a guy on that team that would put an individual trophy ahead of winning another cup.
Yeah, it's what you're saying right now reminds me of something that a scout asked me. Is past behavior the best predictor of future behavior? And it's actually not the case. I mean, my PhD is in behavior, and I will tell you the best predictor of future behavior is environment. And so I think that has a lot to do why with you change your character changes because character, when we talk about character and team culture, what is it? It's just a set of behaviors. And behavior and team culture is the environment because that's where behavior happens. And so the best you could have a player who maybe is not at the top of, his stats and his analytics aren't the greatest, but there's room for improvement. But if you put him in the right environment, it can change, what the trajectory of his future is because that's really what scouting is predicting behavior. I was saying, I was like, maybe I should just have gone into scouting. I'd make a pretty penny because, it's really about predicting behavior.
Gosh, that should be on your bloody resume then, because honestly, because I think now the easiest thing to do is project the skill level or the skating.
Yes, but not the intangibles.
But if you can do that and you've even got a 7, and I mean, I was sent a study, which one of Mark Yannetti, who I ran, he was my co-director with the LA Kings. Like we had during our period running the draft, we had the highest amount of players, NHL players selected in the history of hockey. Right? That our percentage is higher than any. And he laughed because we used to have this battle over players, but it never turned into a battle. It was like, I always aired, if we had a player that we felt was tied, I aired on the side of character and he aired on the side of hockey sense. And when it came to present our arguments to Dean Lombardi, the boss, it was way easier for me to be passionate about talking about the character and the traits and those intangibles than Mark, who one of the best hockey minds I know, trying to explain why this guy has hockey sense is a lot more difficult than explaining why he has character. And if you have both, look out. Now you're talking about a guy that's a coach's dream, right?
Yeah.
That's why I look at guys like when I watch guys like Roddy Brindamore and stuff like that, like my 1 year in character, you're just oozing character, right? And then you can see how you can have your dressing room when you can insert certain players. I personally think that's probably the only organization that he's turned around by. He's so contagious that guys like Slave and now guys that go in there like Martinook, and Martinook's just like, he's a fourth line player, but they are so entrenched in what it is to be a Carolina Hurricane that you can insert a guy that might not be just that. Like you said, like with us, it was, we had heard all these things. We didn't know, but we had heard Marian Gaborik was a bit of like he was just worried. He's a goal scorer. He's a gunslinger, individual guy. And when we had so much strength in our room and Daryl Sutter was just losing his marbles about us thinking about adding that initially, we needed a goal scorer. And we said, look around our room. Like this guy, he's never been in a room with this many leaders. If we could put him in this environment, you're not going to turn into a Selkie winner, but he's going to have no choice in his
Yeah.
contract here to be a great teammate. And he
Yeah.
came in, and the guys loved him. And all of a sudden now, 14, 15 goals in the NHL, in the Stanley Cup playoffs. He could have been the Conn Smythe Trophy. You would have thought he was the best teammate in the world.
Yeah.
Hey,
It's amazing what changing your environment will do.
put him in the environment, right?
Exactly, exactly. Last week I had Scott Morrison on. He is an assistant coach in the NBA for the Utah Jazz.
Yeah.
He's actually from PEI. And so when I was talking to him, we were talking about coaching because he's an assistant coach in the NBA. And we were talking about coaching, and I was talking about, I'm like, yeah, so, John Cooper, really composed, never shows like panic. And then I go, oh, wait. And I started talking about, he goes, let's change the subject. Because we was right after the Olympics, and my heart just broke. And he's like, let's change the subject. But he's a proud Canadian, wonderful, wonderful man. Him and his wife and his family, wonderful. We got connected because his son also has autism. As you know, my brother has autism,
Absolutely.
and so I asked him, what is the most difficult part of coaching in the NBA? And he said, right now, to him, in his perspective, it's coaching effort. And he had said, he thinks that there's less attention around scouting the intangibles, and that he wishes there was more of an effort on not going for just skill and talent, but going for more of the intangibles. And kind of wrapping up, like what we've been talking about here is it's so hard to measure. We have all the stats and the data and the analytics for the skill and for the save percentage and all of that, but we don't have stats or analytics to go based off of character and compete. Like, you can't really measure a level of competitiveness. You can measure it in certain ways by saying these are behaviors that are indicators of competitiveness, but there isn't a stat alone for competitiveness. I would say it's a set of behaviors that we could measure. Do you think there's one element that's the most difficult to highlight or to put your finger on for a player when we're talking about the intangibles? Because I think a lot of times scouts can be so captivated by talent, especially young talent. And then to everything we're saying here is like, yeah, but off the ice, who is he? And even on the ice too, when something doesn't go his way, when he doesn't have the puck on his stick, is he a little salty about it? Is there something that you think when it comes to scouting now in NHL that's an intangible that deserves the most attention? I'm not a scout, but I'll say, for if I had to answer my own question before you answer, I would say the courage. I would say courage, because I think courage has a lot to do with the risk-taking ability on the ice and the courage to be more physical. I see a lot of young players now in the OHL coming up where I'm like, your physicality of your game we need to up that a bit. But there is some courage that goes behind that. That's required of that. And I know that courage isn't like the first one somebody would think of, but that's what, but from my work with so many hockey players over the past many years, if we worked on courage more and identified what does it mean to be courageous, I think we would see a change in it translating to how one performs in their game.
Well, and it covers such, it's a great word. I mean, but I have my Wizard of Oz flashback with regards to the badge of courage, but it's too, but also it's the courage to not fear failure, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
because there's going to be a lot of failure. And if you go out, my dad used to say errors of omission or omission. Like,
Mhm.
if you're afraid and you have the mental capacity to understand you're going to make a mistake, but you have that ability to get over it, and it's not going to sidetrack your entire game, uh,
Exactly.
that's not, I think you've got to learn to do that. Like, there's
Mhm.
certain guys you can tell if they make an error early in a game, you may as well shut them down because
Yeah.
they can't get over it. And now they've
Well,
got
they're gonna grip their stick a little tighter now, and
iPads that if they want, they can watch their mistake over and over and over again. So they can really drive home how bad mood they're supposed to be in. But I think that's a great word. For me, there was another one that was,
what's your word? If you had to give me one word, what would you?
it's not a word. That's great. You knew ahead of time. You got to pick a one word. I can't. So there was always what does the player do when there's no teacher in the room? I
Okay.
always, that's a lot of words, but it's like, because honestly, you have to be a pro to be the ultimate pro. Somebody can give you the doctrine, but if you don't do the hard reps, like we had one guy that used to go like crazy every time the trainer walked in or the coach walked by. And then as soon as the coach walked by, pull out get out the
Yeah.
suntan lotion and do that. You're never going to be the best you can be unless you
What if the word is authenticity? Because if who you are is authentic all of the time.
You're your authentic self. There's no you just don't even if it's not great what's underneath, it is what
Mhm.
it is. This is what I
Yeah,
am. This
yeah,
is what I am. You're gonna because the most successful version of yourself, it's gonna be you.
yes,
You can't
yes.
fake it.
You can't fake it. No.
So authenticity, thank you. That's my word. I'm going ahead of I'll take authenticity for 3,000, doc. That's my like,
Okay, what are you writing down there? You were writing some notes.
there was something I was thinking about because um well, one is the Wayne Simmonds story because it comes full circle that somebody else Wayne said, somebody wants to call you. So another guy called me, another player, same thing, uh, colored hockey player. And he was like, I want you to do for me what you did for Wayne Simmonds.
Okay, right away, buddy.
And I was like, do you think I did this for Wayne Simmonds because he was black?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I'm like, are you kidding me? This is not like I don't have a Wayne Simmonds menu. I said, like from the whole picture, from going there and realizing how much he needed it because there was no electricity and that the sacrifice his brothers were making so he could be the only guy that could afford equipment. All that stuff is why I believed it. None of that stuff aligns with where you right now. This guy, you've fired 3 agents. You've been traded 4 times because everywhere you've been, somebody's wronged you.
Mhm,
Right. And that's not the Wayne Simmons story. I said, I'll
mhm.
try and help you, but don't ask me to give you the Wayne Simmons created his own story.
Yes.
Okay. I was there to nurture it and open certain doors and
Yeah,
provide opportunities for him. But Wayne Simmons made his own story. Okay. I co-authored and then he just took it to another level. He wrote the
yeah.
pages for the end. So that's it. So it's interesting that way. What I wrote down, because I asked you beforehand, because I talk about, and it's caught up to me with elite athletes, because for me, I always had this thing, like what I can't sleep at night. I'll wake up at night and I'll go, oh my God, you failed relations and functions, it's the only thing I've ever failed in my life. And I'm like, you didn't graduate.
Relation
You're
to what?
going to go do it again. And I'm like 58 years old now. I've got 2 degrees. I passed.
Yeah.
But still that failure resonates with me, and it's like that thought that you can't get out of your head because it's the first time that I really failed at something that was changed my direction for a while until I got it proper. Like you can't unless you get over this hurdle, you're not gonna get anywhere near where you wanna be. So I asked you about your thoughts on, like, the McKinnon goal, right?
Yeah,
Then
yeah.
you brought up McDavid, which I think is even more fascinating, which if you have time, I'd like your thoughts on that because I look at him as a total champion,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Yep.
Right? And now McKinnon can always look back and he's got his Stanley Cup, right? But
Mhm.
Connor doesn't have that yet, McDavid. And it grinds me when people make the comments like, well, you can never win the big one, right?
Mhm.
And he didn't get to where he was. All he did was win the big ones all the way through. He's won
Yeah,
a formations. He's gone to game 7 of the Stanley Cup final. Like, how do you mentally, like,
yeah.
be your thoughts on that? Sorry, I know this
Yeah.
is the first show and I'm
No,
asking a question, but
there's a lot of players that I don't work with, but watch all so much hockey and I observe and I kind of give my own analysis of what I would do if I was the psychologist working with them. And the thing is, first for McDavid, he said it himself last season in media in a press conference after the playoffs. He said, we have a lot to be proud of. We have won. But it's really how I see it, and if it was a client of mine, I was working with them, and they were having a difficult time getting over it, and they were hung up on it. For me, first, we'll put it into perspective first. How do you define winning? Because if your definition of winning is only winning the Stanley Cup, then yes, you have not won. If your definition is only winning a gold medal at the Olympics, like, okay, yeah, you did not win the Olympics in Milan, right? But if your definition of winning is winning one hockey game, one series, one season, like, as you go on, then yes, you definitely are a winner. Nobody makes it to game 7 of the Stanley Cup playoffs unless you are a winner. There are behaviors that we would define and then indicators of winning that have happened. Now, on a personal level, like take all the professionalism out of it. I think he's even more of a winner because I think to myself sometimes, like I thought for many days after the Olympics, man, like he's got to get one. Like, come on, he can do it. Because how long can you go before you break? You're going at the Stanley Cup and then a gold medal now, and Canada clearly was amazing. Both teams were amazing, but Canada, I was really pulling for Canada. But I think that's also what makes him even more of a winner is the fact that he hasn't given up. I think that that element in itself is why he will win a Stanley Cup, is because he hasn't given up. Because anybody who's not a winner would have already given up by now. You have your heart broken that many times. Like, sport is so heartbreaking. It just will gut you. And I think that that element of it is, well, he has this passion and this love of the game. And, was it that Players Tribune that came out that he put out? I mean, I think that was telling in and of itself, where he said, people can call me a robot, fine, but this is who I am. And talk about authenticity. I think that is authenticity. Actually, that just gave me chills, like coming full circle. I think that is really just being authentic and being yourself and who he is as somebody who loves hockey so much, as we all know. Um, and I don't know. I mean, again, I do not know him at all, but I would suspect that he probably doesn't. I suspect it breaks his heart, as it would for anybody. But I also would suspect that he maybe takes a couple of days and feels sorry for himself, which is fine, and is sad about it, which is fine. That's a normal coping strategy. But then I suspect that he quickly just snaps and goes, all right, let me get back to work, because of this mentality of, I love this game so much and I am a winner. So now with McKinnon, we were talking about that one shot, and a lot of people just focus on that one shot. But then from my perspective, when I'm helping a player get over something like that, which I was just doing actually the other day, a goalie let in a goal he shouldn't have let in, but he did. Is number one, we take away that word should. I should have made that goal. I should have made that shot. I shouldn't have let that shot in. We have to remove that, because the weight of words on how we think, like the weight of the words that we use to think, has a weight on overall our well-being and how we move forward. Because if you're going to keep living in should haves, I would haves, I could have made that, right? That'll take a tremendous toll on you. And then the other thing is putting it into perspective. Like for McKinnon, that was one shot out of how many in his entire career? So many. And it just happened to be the one that really should have went in. Or I just used the word should. I just said I shouldn't use the word should. But it just happened to be the one that we, are like, oh, if only it were that one. But you know what? This might sound cliche, but like a lot of cliches, it's true. That is sport. And maybe that's why we love sport, is because it breaks your heart, and because winning tastes so good, but losing and the ones you could have got, they hurt so deeply. So yeah,
It hurts. It hurts. It probably hurts them even more because they're authentic and courageous.
there it is. Okay, we can wrap up there. We can write exactly. So the theme of today is be authentic and be courageous. Hey, I think that would make for a badass player. I would scout courage and authenticity any day.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You tell you, it's, if you look behind the heart of a champion and the guys that make it
Hmm.
with excuses, they're
Yeah.
authentic and they're courageous.
Yeah.
It's skill, but we talked about how you measure the stuff that's not measured
Well,
by.
I'll tell you this, but I won't. I'll tell you offline. There are ways to measure. I have some tricks up my sleeve, and there are some ways to go about measure.
Well,
But
authenticity, I guarantee you, off the record, off away from the world, you can measure authenticity. I guarantee you can do that. Okay.
There are ways, you know what? But I'll tell you. So in the psychology literature and research, there aren't necessarily. I'll wrap it up here because I got to let you giving me so much of your time. But I'll say in the psychology literature, there are ways that people have gone about measuring these things, like these personality traits, like courage and authenticity. However, they're not operationally defined. They're not tangible. But in these years working with hockey players, what I've done is of taken everything I've learned in hockey and now creating measurement systems of ways to measure these. That way, when it's no longer when it's proprietary, but I'll go and share it with scouts when I'm ready. Okay, Fitz, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for coming. Thanks for
Absolutely
coming
awesome.
on. Enjoy your time with your parents. Okay.
Hear the
That wraps up today's episode with Mike Futa. Thank you so much for listening. Please don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. That's where you'll be notified when new episodes come out. There's a new one coming up next week. And please share this with your friends, family, colleagues, network of individuals who you think will find it helpful. And I look forward to seeing you next week for next week's episode. Thank you so much again for listening.